Begin the current Daf Mesechtes Kidushin Daf Ayin Zayin. Begin on the top of the Amud, where we continue with the next Mishnah, continue on the theme of Yichus, which is the title of this parak, Asar Yuchasin, regarding the Yichus as applies to Kahuna, regarding the limitations of who they can marry. Shiur corresponds to Pasuk and Cheskel, turn to Daf Achayim, Peshim turn to today's Daf, should be Yichus V'Achin B'nei Yisrael and Eretz Yisrael and throughout the world. Some of the things discussed in today's Daf are that of a Chol. A chol is someone who is born from a prohibited marriage, and the Gemara is going to actually discuss what creates a chol and the chalala. But it's someone who is born from a prohibited union of kahuna, like let's say a grusha to a kohen heter, that child is a chol. Now the question then becomes regarding bas benoi, the chalol's son, and his son's son, and son's son, all the way, whichever one it is, but it's ben achaben, then that bas after that, if it has the same halacha, and bas bitoy. What happens if it's the chalol's daughter's daughter? Is the halacha different in that case or not? Regarding the halacha of Enes Achalisa, the Gemara has a discussion. Do we hold that you could say that when something is prohibited, another prohibition does not take effect? However, the Gemara says it might be a difference by Isser Maisif. When there's an added Isser that was not there before, then once that takes effect for that categorical addition, so then it's going to be added on to something that's already prohibited anyway because of the added prohibition that wasn't there before. And the Gemara ends off regarding interesting case of Kohen Haba Lachaisai, that regarding if a Kohen has a bee with his sister, so that Zayna Mashvila, and then Chazra Bo'ala Asa Chalala. Because what happens is that when he has the bee with her, it's going to make her not into Chalala per se, because that's not a prohibition of Kahuna, it's going to make her but into a Zayna, when you have that Chiv crisis of a relationship with a sister. But then, when she's a Zayna, which is a unique prohibition of the Kahuna, then he'll make her into Chalala, as it is when you have a unique prohibition related to Kahuna, as we'll see at the end of the Daf. So begin the current Daf Ayin Zayin. The Mishnah begins as follows. You have to read it slowly, because of the different opinions in the different cases. Bas Chalal Zachar, the daughter of a male Chalal. As Rashi explains, we're specifically saying it, as the Mishnah itself will explain, that we're talking about the daughter of a male Chalal, because if the mother is a Chalala, but the father is a regular Yisrael, then the halacha is going to be different. Then the child is going to be kosher for Kuna. But here we're talking about that the father is a Chalal, that daughter is Pesula min HaKahuna la'olam. What does that mean, la'olam? The Gemara is going to explain this, but Rashi says, meaning every son that is born in that the daughter that's from ben achar ben, no matter how many generations down, is going to the last daughter is going to be puzzled like the daughter of the first chalal that there was. But bas bitoi from Yisrael, but let's say he has a daughter. Okay, so that first daughter is pasla guna. But when that daughter has a daughter from, let's say, a Yisrael, she's going to be kosher, because we don't say that a bas chalal is more severe than a chalala, which we say that the daughter of a chalala from Yisrael is kosher for kahuna, as the Mishnah is going to say. So the bas bitoy of a chalal is also going to be kosher for kahuna. It's only the daughter. That's the point. The point is the daughter of a chalal, or the ben achar ben of a chalal, could be 10 generations ben achar ben from the original chol that there was, that daughter from any one of those sons is going to be pasah for kahuna. But the daughter of the daughter will be kosher to kahuna, because the bas chalal is not more severe than the chalala herself. A chalala that marries a Yisrael is kosher for kahuna, as the Gemara is going to say right now in the next case. So Rashi is just explaining that we're not going to say that the bas chalal is any more severe than that, and therefore the bas chalal's daughter, although the bas chal we're saying is possible kahuna, but the daughter of the bas chal will be kosher for kahuna, which that's the next case. So this was all the daughter of a male chal married to a Yisraelis. Now the other case, Yisrael, if the father is kosher, he's a regular Yisrael, shenasa chalala, that he married a chalala, so there bitek sheikh lekuna, his daughter is going to be kosher for kahuna. The Gemara is going to learn the reason for this halacha, why it is like that. Now, it specifically says Rashi, obviously, and that's why the Mishnah is saying a Yisrael. But if the kohen, kosher kohen, married a chalala, his daughter would be a chalala. because any child that's born from a prohibited isser for kahuna itself makes it into a chalal, and a kohen is not allowed to marry a chalala. So by virtue of that, it would make the daughter pasal of the kahuna. So that's the flip side. The father is a chal, the daughter is pasal kahuna. If the mother is chalala, then the child is kosher for kahuna. Says the Mishnah further, chalal shenasa bas Yisrael, a chalal that marries a regular Jewish woman, bitay psul lekahuna. His daughter is pasal kahuna, and as Rashi points out, obviously the Gemara is going to ask, you just said this a moment ago. It was the opening halacha of the Mishnah. But okay, continues the Mishnah further. Yudaim, he says that bas ger zachar, the daughter of a male convert, even if the mother is a Yisraelis, he holds kibas chalal zachar. In other words, essentially, a ger is like a chalal, and not really a chalal, but for this idea that the daughter is going to be pasal for kahuna. But if the father is a Yisrael and the mother is a Geiris, just like we said in the halacha of Chalala, the daughter is kosher for kahuna, so too, in Geiris it's going to be kosher, and the Gemara is going to explain. What? It doesn't say. It could be la'olam, like it says regarding Bas Chal Zachar. It's saying it's Kibas Chal Zachar. And the reason for all these Tanaim that they disagree regarding Geiris, the Gemara is going to explain their opinion, because there's other opinions here that the Mishnah mentions. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, he says, no, he disagrees. Yisrael shenasa Geiris. That, what? Oh, yeah. So that would make sense, right? Because it's the same thing as Bas Chal Zachar. So he says that Yisrael shenasa Geiris. When Yisrael marries a Geiris, okay, bita kasher lekuna. That the time the Kamei Rabbi Yehuda agreed to, that the door is going to be kasher lekuna. But here he disagrees. The ger shenasa bas Yisrael. This is essentially the case of Rabbi Yehuda. Bas ger zachar. The father is a ger married bas Yisrael. He says no, not like you said. Bita kasher lekuna. The daughter is also kasher lekuna. You know what? When it's going to be a problem of a ger shenasa Geiris, when the ger married a Geiris, they're both gerim. Then bita psul lekuna. Then the daughter is going to be pasal lekuna. Why? Because as the Gemara is going to explain, you need to have from zera base Yisrael, and you don't have that when both parents are gerim, and the kohen has to marry zera base Yisrael, which is not the case over there. Now that's echad ger. That's whether it's they're gerim or echad avadim, whether they're slaves that were mishul charam that were freed. It's even up until 10 generations, which he explicitly says that. Ashte imam Yisrael, until at least the mother is going to be a Jewess. But if they're gerim, it's going to be forbidden to marry to kahuna. A third opinion, Rabbi Yosef, he says, no, av ger shenas geris, even if a ger marries a geris, bitik shech lekuna. So we have a three machlekes regarding the status of gerim. We had the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, who says that it's problematic if the father is a ger. The Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov said it's problematic only if both parents are gerim. Or Rabbi Yosef says there's no problem but gerim. It's not like chalalim, and they can marry into kahuna even if both parents are ger. Now the Gemara explains the opening halacha of our Mishnah. We said there's a psul of bas chal zachar. The daughter of a male chalal is psul for kahuna. Says the Gemara, in that halacha you said it's psul menakuna la'olam. Says the Gemara, my la'olam, what does it mean forever? So the Gemara explains. Ma'od the tema, what would you say? You would have thought to say it should be like an Egyptian in a daimi that I'm a gayer. Mal, just like over there, it's permitted after 3 generations of kanam here also after 3 generations of chalalim that it would be permitted to marry the daughter, to marry the kahuna. Kamashmon, that's telling you that no, it's going to be li'olam ben acha ben acha ben acha ben acha ben acha ben. You can always say that daughter is going to be pasal for kahuna. Now the Mishnah had said Yisrael shenasa chalala. Yisrael, on the other hand, if only the mother is a chalala, then we said the daughter is kasha for kahuna. Says Gemara, where do we know this halacha that the daughter of a male chalal is going to be pasal for kahuna, but the daughter of a female chalala is going to be kasha for kahuna? Where do we know this? So Amar Rabbi Shimon, he says, I'll explain to you. It says over here in Vayikra, B'lo yichal zaroi ba'amav. It says that he shouldn't desecrate his seed amongst his people. Okay, that's the halacha of chalalas. Now, Menebel says the pasuk. Previously, it says leitam baal ba'amav, that the husband should not make himself impure amongst his people. Which, okay, So it says the Gemara, Malan, just like over there regarding Tumah, is the whole halacha is only Zecharim are warned, because the halacha of Kahuna, which, however you translate that pasuk, that whatever whoever he's not allowed to make himself tummy to the kohen. But the point is, the Isser of Kahuna of Tumah was only said to Bnei Aharon. So just like over there, it's male v'lo nekavis and not females, because it's Bnei Aharon and not Bnei Aharon. So Avkan also over here, when it talks about the psulim of chalalis, is Zecharim, only the males were invalidated, v'lo nekavis, and not the females. So therefore, that's how we know that if the father is a chal, then it's going to be problematic for the daughter. But if the mother is a chalala, which is nekeva, not going to be a problem of chalalas. So the Gemara says, really? So it only applies to males, halach of chalalim, and not to females? Like you're saying, like you're comparing the word ba'amav over there, that's only for the males. You had the halach of tumah for kahuna, so chalala also is only for the male? I mean, I have the following question. Bita shel kohen gadol, the daughter of a kohen gadol from who married a widow, which is prohibited. Tishtiri, that daughter should be permitted, because you said that the females are permitted, and the daughter should not be a halal. There should not be any halach of halal. There should only be halach of halal.
Would that be the same as the regular kohen to grusha?
Yeah, seemingly, yeah. But the reason why you bring kohen gadol is because that's actually the source of where we learn it out from, where it says the halach of halalas. So no daughter should become a halala. So the Gemara, Miksa Benai, that it says, you think it says that his son is going to be a halal? Zarig siv. It says loichal zaray. It says his, which sounds like even females. Loichal zaray ba'amav. So what's the point of the Gzeir Shava then of ba'amav to say, just like over there, it's only males, not females, also over here. That's only lebas bitoy. That's for his daughter's daughter. Meaning to say, the chalala's daughter, or the daughter's daughter of the chalal. But for the daughter of a prohibited union itself, of course, that she's included in zarai, that she can become a halala. But then says the Gemara, okay, wait a second. Bas benoi, the daughter of his son a halal, tishtiri should be permitted. Meaning that you should say that the Gzeira Shava, which tells us that it's only by males and not by females, should tell us that his son's daughter should be permitted, and from what we learn from Zarai, should tell us only the actual child itself that he has from prohibited union. But Zera Zarai, his child's child, should be kosher by Nekevis from the Gzeira Shava, so even if it's from his son. So why are we saying that Baschal Zachar is possible Lo'olam, Ben Benoy, whatever, however far the Bas is going to be forbidden? Why? Shouldn't you learn that from the Gzeira Shav Ba'amav that is only for Zachar, not Nekevis? It says Zarai. Okay, that's only his child. But his son's child, his son's daughter should be permitted. So the Gemara says, no. Ksiv, it says in the pasuk Lo Yichal Zarai. He shouldn't desecrate his seed. Now, the father and his child are mentioned in the same word. Zarai, his child, that word incorporates a father and a child, so that's a hekesh. So makish zaraloi, the pasuk is essentially equating the father to the child. Mahu, just like the father, bita b'sula, his daughter's pasuk, because she's a chalala, that's zarai, abbenoi, so to his son, who's zarai, bita b'sula, his daughter's also pasuk. So therefore, bas benoi is also going to be a chalala. Okay, but then says the Gemara, bas bitoy, his daughter's daughter, who is a chalala, should be titzer, should be forbidden from the same hekesh, because the mother is also zarai. So why are you telling me bas benoi is going to be aser? Because makish hu lezarai. So bas bitoy should also be aser because she's a chalala, and your makish hu lezarai. So just like his daughter is forbidden, so her daughter should also be forbidden. Says the Gemara, imkain, if that would be the case, then Gezeira Shava Mayahanile. What would we be learning out from the Gezeira Shava Ba'amav that's telling us Dafka Zachar not the Kevis? You wouldn't have any case that you're telling me is only by male, not by female. This is the case. That's the most smallest thing that we're going to tell you, that it's only by the males, not the females, to say that, yes, your own child will become a chalala and a chalal, because it says Zaroi, not Benoi, but where we're going to say that it's only by the males, not the females, because it's ba'amav, just like over there, Zechar and Nekev is also over here, is by the child's child. the child's child, there's only going to be when the child is a chalal, so then, meaning to say, then his daughter is going to be forbidden, but the chalala, her daughter, or let's say the daughter of the child, is going to be permitted, is not going to be considered as a pasal of a kahuna.
Who's following all this ichus? Who's following all this?
The kahuna, so that's what they had. They had by the base of Mikdash, they did every day they were there, the Sanhedrin, doing kedrishas and chakiras and bedikas about the yichus from the kahanim. So they followed this. Now the Mishnah said, Chalal shanasa bas Yisrael. We repeated, and that's the Gemara's question. We said again, a chal that marries a bas Yisrael, bita besula. His daughter is possible because she's a chalala as a bas chalal. So the Gemara says, Hatan Lereshi, you already said this. It's a bas chalal zacha, the daughter of a male, just different wording, but you said already. Daughter of a male chalal, pasul min hakun la'olam, it's forbidden for kunim ve'eber. So the Gemara says, you're right. It was unnecessary, but I did on the Reisha, just because we said right before this, Yisrael shanas chalala, the same wording. For Yisrael marries a chalala, the daughter is kosher. To never say so we just say the inverse, chalal shanas bas Yisrael, that the daughter is going to be possible for kunim, but really it was unnecessary because we already said it. Then says the Gemara, Masnitin delikar b'destoy ben Yehuda. Our Mishnah is obviously not like b'destoy ben Yehuda. The time we learn the Brayser b'destoy ben Yehuda, he says, Keshem shebnei Yisrael. Just like the Jewish men are mikvah tahara l'chalalos, they're, so to speak, a purifying mikvah for chalalos. Meaning, we said in the Mishnah, if a Yisrael marries a chalala, the daughter is kasha v'guna. So essentially, the man is validating the daughter that he has from her daughter from him is going to be kasha v'guna, although she's a chalala, but we said, Yisrael shenaz chalala bitek shel l'guna. So essentially, the husband is a purifying mikvah from the chalalas of his wife, that the daughter that she has from him will be kasha v'guna. So the still holds the same that goes the other way too. Kach b'nois Yisrael. So to the Jewish women are mikvah tar l'chalalim. They're purifying mikvah to validate his daughter that he has from her for kahuna. Our Mishnah is not like that. Our Mishnah said that a chal that marries a bas Yisrael, the daughter is possible for kahuna. So obviously our Mishnah is not like Rabbi Shloimy ben Yehuda. Okay, but says about Talmud Rabbi Shloimy ben Yehuda, what is my Talmud Rabbi Shloimy ben Yehuda? What is the reason for his halacha? Says Gemara, because Amar the Pas says Ima Yikra. Says Lo yichal zari ba'amav, he should not desecrate his seed amongst his people. Now, from the fact that it doesn't say ba'amimav, it sounds like that he's only going to be mechal his daughter only when it's ba'am echad in the singular, hu de mechal. In other words, when him and his wife are from the same quote-unquote am, that they're both chalalim. But b'shnei amamim ein a mechal. But when they're two different amim, meaning one's a chalal and one's not, either him or her, then the child's not going to be pasal b'kahuna, it's not going to be mechul zaroy. And that's the source of this story, that, yeah, either one is going to kasher. They both have to be ba'amav in the same am, the same category, but if it's from two different categories, then the child's not going to be a problem for kahuna. Now, continuing on this pasuk, we learn Braysa. It says, Lo yichal zaroy. Okay, the problem of marrying someone usher for the kahuna is that you shouldn't desecrate your seed. Now, only zaroy. I would only know the child becomes a chal or chalala. He atzma minayin. The widow herself who married the Kohen Gadol becomes a chalala with the intimacy from her husband, from being prohibited for truma, marrying kahuna, to get lashes if a Kohen Hedyot later has be with her because she's a chalala. How do I know that she herself becomes a chalala? You'll say a kabel. What's a kabel chaymer? Mazar, just like his seed, his children. Shlav avera, the child did not commit a sin. Mischalala becomes desecrated. So he shav avera, the woman herself, who commit a sin, because the pasuk said lo yikachu, which prohibits the woman to be married to the man, as the Gemara says, Yevamos apedal mabeis. In addition to chalalas, isn't that a kabel chaymer that for sure she becomes a chalala? Says the Gemara, no. Hu atzma yechiach, the husband, he'll disprove that logic. Because he commits a sin, he does not become a chalal because it says lo yichal zarei, which means only his children, not himself. And the Mishnah teaches in B'chayos of Beis, if someone marries women in sin, he's only invalid to do the avoid of the kuna until he takes a neder prohibiting having any benefit from them. The moment he takes a neder, he could do the avodah because he does not become a chal. So that logic is disproved from the husband. Says the Gemara, no, that's not a good question. Because malahu, what we find by the husband is, shekain ein mischal b'chol makom. We never find, no matter who he has bia with, even with a shivcha or with a zayna, the husband never becomes a chal because of the bia. And therefore, you'll say here too. But Taima Behi, what are you going to say by the woman? Shemischalelis b'chol makom. That in general, if let's say a kuti or a chal or a nasan or a mamzer has bia with her, he makes her pasal bakuna, as the Gemara said in Davayin Dalman Beis, which the Gemara learns in Yevamot of Samachesem and Al from Uvas Koyin, Kisil Ishdar, that once she has bia to a pasal, she herself becomes pasal. And so therefore, since she becomes invalidated by other prohibited bias, it would make sense that she would become pasal here also, and therefore it is a good Kal V'Chaimer to say, if the children become chalal, for sure she also does. The husband, he never becomes pasal from the bia. The women do become violated. They're different in their spiritual status, that the bia psula makes her pasal, and therefore it would apply so to here. But then says the Brisa, the im nafshach loima. Now, if you want to say some type of response, you don't like the Kal V'Chaimer that I'm telling you, and you're going to say that no, the woman should be valid and not a chalala, amakra. So now I have a pasuk in the Torah that shows you that she does become a chalala. Because it says in the pasuk, lo yichal zachay. Don't desecrate your child by having this relationship. Now, the primary chil that the pasuk is talking about sounds like the woman herself. Why? Because it's saying lo yichul. Don't create it something as a downfall, like a desecration. That's only referring to Zesha Yikasher ben Ischal. It's only appropriate to use the terminology with someone that was kosher and is becoming a chalala now. But as children, they are invalid from the moment they're born. That it really is not appropriate, the terminology of chalalam. Chilul, Hashem, let's say, is something was holy, and then you desecrated, you profaned something. But that wouldn't apply really by the children, because the children were never born as kiddush and then becoming chalal. The woman was kosher, and then you're creating chalalas. Therefore, the pasuk seems to say the woman herself. But then the Gemara asks, "Mayim nafshach loimer." Why are you saying if you want to say? Another, what would we have responded on the Kal V'Chaimer that you have to bring a pasuk to say just in case? So the Gemara says the question would have been like this: the chitim, if you're going to say that, what do you mean? The whole source of the halacha that you're bringing, that you're saying that the woman herself should be a chalala from a Kal V'Chaimer from Zaroi, that, wait a second, you're saying because they never committed a sin and still they become chalalim, so for sure the woman who committed sin for sure should become a chalala. On that ikal you could ask and say, no, it's not true, it's not a Kal V'Chaimer. Malazar, because what do you find by his children, shekin yitziasa ba'aveira? Their whole formation was in sin, so therefore you would say that's why they're halalim, but she was not created in sin, so because she didn't have one time she becomes a halalim. So therefore, you have to have a pasuk to say lo yichal, don't desecrate, which is lo yichulul, don't make something desecrated. Zeshay kosher from this chal, that's something that was kosher and that became a chal. Therefore, the pasuk seems to also be saying that the woman becomes a chalal. Now, tell them learn a brisa, elaborating on and explaining this. What is a chalala? Says the brisa, called shenoidim and absulim. It's anyone that's born from the invalid ones. It says, my psulim, what does it mean, invalid ones? If you think to say it means any woman that's puzzled to this husband, even if he's Yisrael, if his bia, if his intimacy is in sin, where if it's not anything related, let's say, to mamzeris, automatically any other psul makes the child into a chalal. But what are you going to say? Harimachzik rishasai. If someone remarries the woman that he divorced after she had married someone else, the psul, which that's invalid to him, as the pasuk says in the Ram Chavdal, lo yuchabalo, the husband not take her back anymore. Now, baneo ksherim, then we know that the children are kosher. The daughter's kosher for kahuna if he's Yisrael, because the pasuk says in the Varim, if he goes and remarries his ex after she married someone else, it says to'evahi, it's an abomination. Now, when it says he, it sounds like he to'eva. She, the woman herself, is an abomination where they get punished because of the sin. But ve'im baneo to'evim. But the children are not an abomination, meaning the daughter is kosher for kahuna. So you see, it's not any puzzle for this husband making the daughter into a chalala. Some of you says, no, this is what we were saying. Ezahi chalala, what's a chalala? Kol shenoidum in psul kahuna, not any psul. Any daughter or child that's born from a psul of kahuna. Says Gemara, wait a second, is that your final answer? Nolda in? It's only if you were born, loy nolda loy, but if you're not born from psul kahuna, then you don't become a chalala? Hare almana. But there's the widow to the Kohen Gadol, ugrusha. There's a divorcee to a regular Kohen who she becomes desecrated with that bia, and also you have zaina. You have, if let's say a woman had bia with a puzzle to her, she becomes a zaina, where by a Kohen Hedyed, she's called a chalala to get lashes because of chalala, because any Isser Kahuna makes her a chalala, but a zaina is from another Isser, from other bias psulis. But be that as it may, those women that they weren't born v'kav chalala and they're still chalalas. So Amar Rabbi says, oh, come on, this is the way you have to say the phrase. Ezer chalala muzkeres. What's the chalala that's mentioned? Which Gemara is going to explain shortly. What does that mean, mentioned? Which never had an opportune time of being kosher ever. That's kosher noidim and a psul kuna. That's that you're born from psul kuna, right? You could become a chalala, but you had a shasa kosher. You were kosher at one point. When is it that you always, from your beginning, always a chalala? That's if you're born from a psul kuna. So the Mamai Muskeres, what do you mean when you say the mentioned one? So when Bitzah Ba'oven, he says, this is what we mean to say. Is a chalala? What is a chalala that's mentioned in the Torah? That's muskeres. She'ikachem in the Torah, that its root is from the words of the Torah, meaning that the primary understanding of it is from the pasuk that says you shouldn't take a halala, and ve'ein tzrich lefarish medivir seifim. You don't have to explain it from rabbinic law because it's explicit in the Torah. That's called shanoigdim ipsule kahuna. That's if you're born from a prohibition of kahuna, because in general a chol is a child that's puzzled from a psul kahuna, because it says in the pasuk v'lo yichal zarei, don't desecrate your children. But a chalala, that she's made a chalala through bia, even though we said in a way the pasuk seems to be talking about her, but that's really a drasha that we have to say. Oh, chalala means it was kosher, then it was challah. But if you read the pasuk like a child, you'll see v'lo yichal zarei, it's talking about the children. So what's the one that's muskeres? That meaning that was born, that was zarei, that was born. That's born from a psul kahuna. Now, we'll learn the Brisa that we get a little bit more interesting now. It says the Gemara, almana, almana, almana.
So is the Gemara now questioning the Pashut of the pasuk?
No, the Gemara was just saying that if you're going with the simple pshat of the pasuk, when it mentions chalala, which chalala is that? When it says leichal zare, it's talking about the children that are born in a state of psul. It's specifically if it's from a psul kahuna. That would make the child, but let's say Machzik Rushas, it would not make the child into a chal or a chalala. It has to be psul kuna. Now, in the Brisa, continue on this, we were talking about the prohibition of a kohen gadol to almana, or these psuli kahuna that we make into chalalas. So the Gemara says, if let's say someone had intimacy with a widow that had 3 different titles of almanos, of the prohibition of almana, in the chayv ela achas, is only going to be liable for one liability of lashes, which Gemara is going to explain later on. Let's say grusha. Let's say she was a divorcee. And the chayv la'achas is only going to be liable for one. Now, the pasuk in Yikra says, almana, ugrusha, v'chalala, zayna. The pasuk says, es eila lo yikach, the kohen gadol can't marry any one of these. Kiyim b'sulam me'amav, he is only allowed to marry a virgin. Says the Gemara, these 4 that we're talking about, that the pasuk mentions, widow, divorcee, chalala, and a zayna. So bisman shem keseder, when they're in the order that it's mentioned here in the pasuk, that she first became a widow, then she married a second man and he divorced her, then she married a kohen and therefore she became a chalala, because a kohen is not allowed to marry a divorcee. Then she had biyah to one of the psulim, or let's say to her brother or some relative that a biyah of nus, then she becomes a zayna. Like Rashi explains, because from the psuli kahuna, you become a chalala but not a zayna. From other Yisraelim, you become a zayna but not a chalala, as the Gemara is going to explain later on. So if you did it in this order of widow, divorcee, chalala, and zayna, then chayav kol achas v'achas. If a kohen gadol then marries her, he's going to be liable for actually all 4 of these prohibitions. But if it's the other way around, zinsa, if let's say she first had relations with her brother or some mamzer or whatever, and so she became a zayna. Then b'nis challah, because she then got married to a kohen who made her into chalala, because a kohen is prohibited to marry a zayna. Then b'nis garsha, he divorced her, and then b'nis armala, she got widowed from the next husband. In the chavala achas, if a kohen gadol then marries her, he's only going to be liable for one liability, as Gemara is going to explain, the reason. That's the Bryce. Interesting Bryce. The Gemara is going to go through it now, each case by case. Amamar. The time the Bryce said, Almana. If a woman is a widow, in a chayv achas. Then now a kohen gadol marries her, only have one liability. Says Gemara, wait a second. In this case, Almana. Tell me what are you talking about when you're saying Amana? If you're telling me that this kohen gadol, he went out and he had bia first with Reuven's widow. That's on Sunday night. Monday night he's Valmana Shimon, and he goes to Shimon's widow. Almana's Levi. Then on Tuesday night he goes to Levi's widow. He's going to all the widows that are in town. So Amay Nechayv Alachas. Why are you saying only be liable for one widow? You tell me only Nechayv one because Gemara contains them at Beis. I don't understand. How did Gufin Muchalakim or Shemis Muchalakim? Which says unnecessary to say Shemis Muchalakim, but these are different bodies with different shemis, meaning they're individual prohibitions of widow. These are separate isurim. Why would you say that he would be chayiv only one for the three different prohibitions of the three different women that he had be with, which each one is distinctly prohibited? Ella rather says the Gemara, no, it means shabal almana achas shalish bias. It means the one widow, the same woman, almana, he had be with her 3 times. Says the Gemara, wait a second. Oh, so that's exactly what the Gemara says. The Gemara says, hey chadami. The Gemara says, wait a second, what's the case talking about? If they didn't warn him, so pshita in the chayv achas, obviously, there's only one mistake that he made, because they didn't warn him between each time. They said, she's a...
You need a straw by every avail?
To have a liability, you would need to have asra.
Everything you need a straw?
Yeah, to be liable, you need to have a warning. Or even if you didn't, let's say shaygig, it's then considered one mistake that you made. It's only one error. So then, of course, you only chayv only one. That wouldn't be a chiddush. What are you going to say that every time he came on Sunday night to the lady, Monday night, and every time he's going to say, hello, I want you to know, she's a widow, you're forbidden. And every time. So why is it only liable one, even though it's the same woman? But if it's not, we learn in the Mishnah that's Bor Masech, there's Nazir, Bor Masech, Makis. Nazir, if you have a Nazir drinking wine the entire day. So only liable for one liability. And like Rashi explains, all these that we're talking about chayiv refers to malkas, because it was one liability that he was violating. But if Amrli told him al tishta, every day the guy comes back and says 30 minutes later, hello, don't drink. And he comes back, don't drink. He drinks. Well, every drinking session is going to be liable, even though it's all in one day. So how do we understand this halacha? Why are you chayiv for this 3 bees in this almana, manav shach? Like, if it's only warned one time, it's pashut. And if it was warned every time, then why would you be chayiv only once? So once the late tzricha knows necessary, that truth is, he had one bia, shabal almanas Ruvain, which, it was only one time that he did this. But she was widowed from Ruvain, Shais almanas Shimon, that she was widowed from Shimon, Shais almanas Levi, she was widowed from Levi. So this woman already on her 4th husband, this kohen gadol is with this woman who, black widow, had widowed all these men, and now he's having be with her one time. That's what we're calling mana. Ma'odem, what would you say? These are different names, meaning she's a widow from 3 different men. So you would have thought to say that, okay, there's a separate isser of almana every time from the same, because it's a different almana. That's what we're teaching, that no, you need to have different bodies. It's still the same woman, and it's one time doing with her. It's not going to be 3 different isurim in the same woman of, let's say, that's really what the next conversation we're going to go into. You have a shtik treif, and in the treif there's chaylev and there's nevela, and so you would think, okay, there's many different isurim over here. No, it's the same isur, and even...
The treif is 2 different things.
Right.
But what about if somebody has a treif and he had one hole in the liver and one hole in the lungs? So it's twice.
Right.
So he's not getting twice.
Right. That's a good example of explaining what the Gemara was saying. That even though it is treif in a few places, but it's, this amona is amona in a few different places, but it's ein shtik amona, and therefore it's only mechayev achas. Now the Gemara goes back. Right. Right. In a way. Right, but in a way, it really is, because it's a shemos. It doesn't. I don't know if it means has to mean exactly a different isser per se, but it is another isser versus the same body. So it's a widow. It's another widow, right? But yeah, oftentimes that's what it means, right? But that's what the Gemara is entertaining to say, that that's really like, it's like another isser of, in other words, if you had this in 3 different women, you would be chayiv al kalachas v'achas. It's the same isser. It's not because is it because of guf mechalek? That's really what Taisa discusses.
Because he made it 3 times the Avaira, he made 1 time the Avaira.
No, behalam echad, let's say.
No, but it's not enough. First of all, we're talking.
Or rid of not Hama.
3 times the Avaira. It's a big difference. He committed 1 sin. He didn't commit 3 sins.
Right,
He
here.
committed 1 act.
Right. Yeah. So the Gemara now brings the case of that we mentioned, if it's in the order of the Torah, almana, or grusha, bechalala, zaina. So we said you can be chayiv on each and every one. So the Gemara wonders, Hi Tana, this Tana, my kasava, what does he hold? What's the question? Iksav, if he holds what's called isra chalal isra, that something's already prohibited, but you could add on another isra on it. Say pchanami, the other way also, if zaina, then chalal, then grusha, almana, should also be chayiv on every one of those because the isra could take effect. V'ikasav, if he holds ein isra chalal isra, that once something prohibited, another prohibition cannot take effect. I feel like I said, then even the order of almana, then grusha, and chalal, zaina should not be prohibited. Oh, what's the understanding why it works only one way and not the other way? So the Gemara Rabbi says, Hi Tan, this time the Issa Chalal Issa Leslie. You're right. If something already prohibited, he holds you cannot then be prohibited for something else on it. But Issa Maisif, but if there's something that's in addition, that could take effect on something that's already prohibited when the second Issa is adding on to prohibited in something that up until now was permitted just due to the first Issa. That Isla that he holds that it would take effect even though it was already Issa because of the first Issa, to now be Chayiv on 2. So therefore, when it's in this order, every one of these are adding on something that was permitted up until now, as the Gemara is going to explain. Amana asur l'kohen gadol. Okay, let's start with the issue number 1. She was a widow, so that's only asur l'kohen gadol. She's only permitted to a kohen gadol, but v'shai l'kohen hedjid. But she's permitted to a regular kohen. Havala gerusha. Now move on to stage 2. Now that she gets divorced. So migadi taisibla, since we're adding on to her because of the title of Gerusha, Isuru ligabe kohen hedjid. Now she has something added on to her. She prohibited to a regular kohen, which she was permitted up until now. Okay, then the taisibla isura. We're going to add on to her the issa of Gerusha, also ligabe kohen gadol. Even though she was prohibited to him anyway because of amana, but now she prohibited him also because of Gerusha. And then if he would marry her, he'd be liable not only for amana but also for Gerusha. But this amana grusha is still permitted to eat truma if she's a bas kain. She didn't do anything wrong. She was allowed to marry whoever she married that she got widowed from, and then she's allowed to marry the kain hedya who she got divorced from. But then when she marries a kain hedyid, havalo chalala. Now that the kain hedyid marries a grusha, so she becomes a chalala. Migadi taisa b'sura. Since we're adding on the prohibition because of chalala, lamechal b'truma, because anyway she's been into the kohen hedya because she was a grusha. So what's being added on when she now marries a kohen hedya and she becomes a chalala is that she cannot eat truma, as the Gemara learned out from loichal, that she becomes nischal from her kedusha. So once we're adding on that element, then they taisa b'sura l'gabe kohen gadol. We're going to add on even the isra regarding the kohen gadol to get lashes, even because of not only almana grusha but also as chalala. But the Gemara says, okay, I understand everything up until this point. Elazaina, my iser meisef isbe. What are you adding on with the zaina? What is she becoming prohibited because of being a zaina that she was not prohibited beforehand? What is she prohibited in? She's also kohen gadol, also kohen head, also in truma. There's nothing really adding on now that she becomes a zaina. So Rav Chana bar Rav Katina, he says, you're right, but hoyel v'shem is nus paisel b'Yisrael. There is a situation that a title of znus would make her prohibited in something more, which would be even a regular Jew, not a kohen gadol, not a kohen hedjid, not a truma. For example, let's say if a woman is mezana when she's a married woman, she has an extramarital affair, she becomes prohibited to even the Yisrael, her husband. Here also, even though this znus that this woman's doing is not when she's married, but the name of znus we find is generally could be a maisiv. So even though in this case it's not, but since it has the name of his nose, would be adding on, so therefore it will still be considered Issa Maisif, and therefore it's going to be added on to the list of Isurim that the Kohen Gadol is going to have if he marries this woman that's Almana, Grusha, Chalala, and Lezaina. Now, relating to this topic, the Gemara brings Tani Tanaka Mid Rav Sheshes. There was a teacher of a Bryce who taught in front of Rav Sheshes that Kol Shu B'Yikach, anyone that is in the category of V'hu Isha V'Vsulel Yikach, which is who the Kohen Gadol is allowed to marry, the pasuk near that is the one that says, "But almana, grusha, v'chalal lezaina, lo yikach." So the pasuk is teaching us from the smichas apsukim. It's telling us whomever you say regarding her that when she's a basula he's allowed to take her, which is fit for a Kohen Gadol. That's the type of woman harehu b'lo yikach. If she's a widow, that you cannot marry her. But the inference is, any woman that anyway was not allowed to be married by the Kohen Gadol, is not included in the prohibition of marrying her when she's a widow. Says, what is that? What's that coming to exclude? That excludes if the high priest is intimate with his sister that's a widow, that he's not going to get lashes for the Isser of Kahuna to the Almana only because of the Isser of his sister. Because the Isser of the Yikach Almana is only if he was able to be Yikach when she was a Basula. His sister was never able to be married even when she was a Basula. And therefore, when he does have Bia with her as an Almana, he's not going to get lashes for the Isser of Almana.
It's a common label with the Rabbi. It's a bigger issue to be with the sister.
Saying you could say that on that's part of the conversation about what we're really going to have about Isser Meisef in a way. Kimli Rabbi is really when you do two, what? Kimli Rabbi, when you get the greater punishment you're talking about?
Yeah, greater punishment. If he's been warned, he could get missed.
Right.
So that's a greater issue.
Right. But I'm saying the Shaila is, are you getting the Isser at all even? He's saying that you didn't even violate the Isser. I mean, he's saying She'ena Loikala. I mean, the nafkamin would also be if you were warned, let's say, regarding
Yes.
only regarding Almana, let's say, not regarding the sister. So then,
You were not born because
right,
of the sister.
right. Say, here she's Almana, right? But they don't know it's a sister. That would be a simple nafkamina for that case. But this is what the one who's teaching a brayso in front of Rav Sheshes. This halacha. That Amalei Rav Sheshes said to him, "Damalach mani, wait a second. Who's telling you this brayso? Reb Shimon he must be Reb Shimon, because he says Einis Achalalissa, that once she's prohibited as his sister, the prohibition of Almana cannot take effect on that. Because the time in the brayso, Reb Shimon says, someone goes and eats nevela on Yom Kippurim, he's pater from kares. Why? Because the Isser of Yom Kippurim cannot take effect on the Isser of this that was already nevela beforehand. Like Rashi explains, he says that if it became a nevela from before Yom Kippur, so the Isser nevela was there beforehand. And even if it became a nevela on Yom Kippurim, even so, it was already forbidden from Erev Yom Kippurim because of Evim Menachai. Whichever way you look at it, it was never shechted. So it already had a pre-existing prohibition before Yom Kippurim came along. So either way, Reb Shimon says, okay, Yom Kippurim, you're not going to be chayav for karas. You'll be chayav the lav of nevela, but not karas. Because the ira abanan, so Rav Sheshes, if you think that this brayso you just told me is the rabbanon, they say isser chalas. So they say no, you eat nevela Yom Kippurim, you're going to be chayav karas because the isser of Yom Kippurim takes effect. If it takes effect, then it should take effect also the isser of almana on the isser of his sister. So that says the teacher of the brayso no. Filtim rabban, you can even say the brayso is like the rabbanon. Kiyam rabban isser chalas. So when do the rabbis say that isser can take effect on the pre-existing isser? Hanamili isser chamal isser kal. That's something more severe on something that was only a less severe. Yom Kippurim is karas. That could take effect in isser nevela, which is only a negative prohibition. Aval isser kal, but a lighter isser, for example, almana kan gadol, al isser chamer, on a pre-existing more severe isser of a sister, which is chiv karas, lo ichal, that's not going to take effect. And therefore, even the Rabbanan would agree that you would not say isser chal isser in this case. That's one version of the conversation. Ikadami, those say that actually Rav Sheshes said to him, no, Mani, who is the time of the brayso that had to let us know that the Isser Amonu to Kangul would not take effect on the Isser B'chaisai? It must be Rabbanan. He was saying the other way around. Must be Rabbanan. The army that they say generally Isser Chalal Isser, that Isser will take effect in the pre-existing Isser, and therefore they had to tell us that no, That v'chiyam rabbanan, when the rabbanan say isachal lisa, that is to take effect on the pre-existing istan mili isacham alisakal. That's only when the first one was lighter, and now the second one is more severe. Aval iser kal isachamer, but a lesser one on a pre-existing more severe one, leicha will not take effect, and therefore you cannot have that almana take effect on the chayseh. Because the Rabbi Shimon says, Rav Sheshe says, because if you think the Bryce is like Rabbi Shimon, I don't understand. If he holds that even the more severe cannot take effect on less severe, like we have by Yom Kippurim, does not take effect on the Vela, so you think it's going to take effect a lesser one on the more severe one? Of course not. I wouldn't need Rabbi Shimon to teach me this. It must be the Rabbanan, not Rabbi Shimon. And that says the Gemara, no, it's not necessarily proof. Because Ma'otem, what would you say? Isaku Nishani. The prohibition when it comes to kun is different because the Torah gives many more mitzvahs for kahanim than it does for regular Israel. And therefore maybe we think even a kal iser of Amalakan Gadol on a chamer of a chaysai would take effect. Kamashma, because Rabbi Shimon had to teach you that, and there was not a raya. So those are the two versions of the conversation. Either he was saying that it's Rabbi Shimon, and they said no, it could be Rabban, or he said it's Rabbanan, and they said no, it could be even like Rabbi Shimon. Now, Amalei Rav Papa Abaya. Rav Papa said to Abaya the following case. Yisrael haba ala chaysai. If
Pardon me, Rabbi, but you can't really say that it's a kahuna shining. Because so many places in Shas we learn Hilchos kahuna on many other things.
we usually ask on, let's say, Yavamis, in the beginning we ask, we say, it's a kahuna shani, how do you know? Maybe it's only by kahuna. And therefore, if we have Xer Shava, we could say it, but generally, just to learn it from his kahuna, we say, well, Riba HaKasa Mitzvahs Yisaidis, we say, maybe you can't learn out from kahuna. So that is usually the question that we ask. So Rav Papa asked Abaya, he says to Abaya, he says, I'll tell you the following case. Yisrael habala chayseh. So if a regular Yisrael commits incest, he has relations with his sister. So halacha is pashid, the zayna mashvila. That I know, he makes his sister into a harlot because she had a bia psula with her brother. So she becomes forbidden to a kohen because she's a zayna. I got that. But my question is as follows. Chalala mashvila? Does he make her a chalala that a kohen would get lashes for her because she's a chalala? Or maybe he does not make her into chalala. What's the question? So the Gemara explains. Meaning, do we say kabel? What's the kabel? Mechiva lav and have a chalala. Just a negative prohibition makes the woman into chalala, like let's say a malakan gadol or grusha chalakain hedge. That's a regular iser lav, and still she becomes a chalala. So mechiva kris like hashkein. So when she's having incest with her brother, you don't think he's gonna make her into chalala as a chiv karas? I did, maybe no. And chalala el misakuna. Maybe chalala is only from a iser kuhuna, even though there's a more severe. Will not make her into chalala. So Malay said to him, "Ein chalala el misakun b'vad." So we said in the manala for the children. He was saying for the woman herself also, the chalala is only when you have an isser kuhuna. The woman will not become a chalala, a desecrated woman, even something more severe of karas, if it's not a unique kuhuna isser. So Amar Rava, he says, "Menah milsa damar abanam." Where do the rabbis know this idea that in chalala misser kuhuna, that chalala is only from an isser kuhuna? They're telling learn the brayso. Brayso says, "Lo yomer gerusha b'kohen gadol." You really shouldn't have to say the prohibition of a divorcee when you're talking about the prohibitions of a high priest. Because it's a kabel chaymer kohen hedyet. It's a kabel chaymer from a regular kohen. But I would say, look, hashla kohen hedyet asur, if a regular kohen prohibited in a gerusha, the kohen gadol mebayi, do I have to tell you for kohen gadol, like Rashi says, he was also once a regular kohen. He was also a chayid that was a regular kohen hedyet. Became one day kohen gadol. Now he suddenly becomes a kohen gadol. He's permitted in the gerusha. So the question is, Lama Nemra, why does it Taka mention the Issa Grusha by Kohen Gadol? Oh, it's coming to teach you something. What's it coming to teach you? Kshem Shechaluka Grusha. Just like the prohibition of a divorcee is individuated Mizayna v'chalalam from the prohibition of Zayna Chalala, which is mentioned by Kohen Hedyet, which the Issa Grusha has its own negative prohibition. Where the pasuk says, "V'isha grusha mi'isha lo yikach," it says a woman divorced from her husband, the kohen should not take, which teaches you that if a zayna and a chalala is also a grusha, she gets lashes also for being a grusha. Ah, okay. So that's what we're saying, grusha again by the kohen gadol to tell you, kach haluka b'kohen gadol. So too, it's individuated by the high priest, even though we said to him in one lav. It's right. We said it's one pasuk. Amana grusha b'zayna chalala said in one pasuk. Still, it's coming to teach you we say the word Grusha by Kohen Gadol, tell you he also has that it's going to be its own individual liability. So the Gemara said, Pshita, obviously, Migru Gada. What do you think? He's any less? Well, because he becomes a Kohen Gadol, you think his sanctity becomes lessened? But when he was a Kohen Hedjid, you told me he was already individuated to be liable separately for Grusha. Well, when it comes to Kohen Gadol, you think it would be less Chamer? The Gemara says, Ella, right. No, you have to amend what we just said. Kshem shechaluka grusha. Just like we said that the Isra of Grusha is individuated from Mizayna v'chalala, from the Isra of Zayna chalala, b'koyin hedyet. When we talk about a koyin hedyet, kach almana, so to a widow, which is not mentioned by koyin hedyet, chaluka megrusha v'chalala v'zayna is individuated from divorcee chalala zayna b'koyin gadol. Meaning, if this woman was a widow and a grusha and a chalala and a zayna, so then the kohen gadol is michayev on each one individually. Says Rashi, this that the Tana picked to individuate for Amana itself and did not need it to individuate, let's say, Chalala from Zayna, is because Chalala, that is individuated from Zayna, that we already know from Kohen Hedjid. Because the Torah already revealed us by Grusha, and therefore, obviously, the same would be Chalala. But Amana, which is something that was never mentioned by Kohen Hedjid, which is only Adam and Kohen Gadol, you don't find individuation. So therefore, you needed to learn out to mention the Grusha by Kohen Gadol to tell us that it's going to have a different halacha, because just mentioning Amon is not telling you that, because Amon is being added on. How do I know but that Amon will have all individual by saying Grusha, which you didn't have to say? Oh, to say that it's give me the halacha of individuation, okay, that tells us why it says Amon and Grusha. Grusha because of individuation. Amon to say because that's what's added on. But Chalala never. Why does the Torah tell you this of Chalala to Kohen Gadol? Again, she was already forbidden when he was a Kohen Hedjid. Why mention Chalala by Kohen Gadol? Says the Gemara that it comes to tell you that in Chalala elam issa kuhuna, and this is actually the source to tell you that Chalala is only from a prohibition of kuhuna. This is learned out from the extra pasuk, because why are you repeating Chalala by Kohen Gadol? For this purpose, to tell you to learn out from the seder that's mentioned in the pasuk, because like we said, it says Amana, Grusha, Chalala, and Zayna. So after it mentions Amana Grusha, which are only prohibitions that apply by Kehanim, then it mentions Chalala, because to tell you Chalala is only from Issa Kahuna. And it doesn't mention Chalala after Zayna, because we find the name of Znuz would be psul by Yisrael also. Come to tell you that she's only considered called a Chalala only from a Bia Psula of Kuna itself, and not from a Bias Issa that applies even by Yisrael, even if it's his sister, which is the incest and Chiv Kars, it will not make her into Chalala. That is the source of Rava, that he said, how do we know that Chalala is only going to be from Bi Psula of Kahuna? And one last question. But then the question is, okay, Zaynul Amanemra. So that explains why it says Amana, to tell you, because that's another Issa Kohen Gadol has. Grusha is the individuation. And Chalala is teaching you that Ein Chalala Ela B'Sula Kuna. But why does it repeat Zayna? Zayna already know it's prohibited from a Kohen Hedjid. Says the Gemara, that's to teach you something else. Nemer kan Zayna, it says over here by the Kohen Gadol Zayna, but Nemer Lan Zayna says over there by the Kohen Hedjid Zayna. Ma kan, just like over here by the Kohen Gadol Zare Chulen, his children become Chalalim, like it says Leichal. Avlahalan, also over there by the Kohen Hedjid, we learn out from Kohen Gadol, that was that question you asked previously, why we bring Amal and Kohen Gadol, because to tell you that's how we know Zare Chulen, that also by a regular Kohen who does his prohibited, his children Ozrig and Michulen. So Rav Ashi concludes a very interesting case. It says Hilkach, you have what comes out like this, is that since you tell me that Chalal is only from Issa Kuhuna, if you have a Kohen, a regular Kohen or Kohen Gadol, Habala Chaysai, that he takes his single sister and he commits incest with his sister. So it's a Getin type of Ein Chesed and Aleph, Zayna Mashvila. So he makes her into a Zayna that a Kohen who would marry her would get lashes because she's a Zayna, because she had a Bia of Znus from someone that's forbidden to her. But Chalala le Mashvila. But he wouldn't make her into Chalala, and the second Kohen who would have Bia with her would not get lashes because of Chalala, because that Isser, like we said, you're not going to have another Isser take effect on the Isser of the, because that's already Isser of incest that every Yisrael has. That makes her into a Zayna. But Chazra Ba'aleha, if the brother committed incest not once, but twice, whether the brother or some other kind, then Asa Chalala, because that she was prohibited as a Zayna is only prohibition of Kahuna. Now when he has bia with her, a uniquely Isser Kuna bia, that makes her into halala. So it's only then that she can become a halal, only if he has bia a second time. Make it to any time of those things.